For years, Toronto's housing market has felt like this impossible puzzle. But what if the solution everyone was hoping for actually made the problem even worse? Today, we're explaining the city's dangerous housing paradox. For what feels like forever, the only story out of Toronto has been about sky-high prices locking pretty much everyone out of the market. So when prices finally start to fall, that should be a huge relief, right? Well, the reality is way more complicated, and as we're about to see, it's kicked off a whole new crisis.
And look, we're not just talking about a little dip here. We are talking about a 30% plunge in average prices since the peak back in 2022. To give you some perspective, that's the single biggest drop Toronto has seen in more than 3 decades.
Okay, so let's get right into it with our first section, the affordability trap. To really get what's happening now, we've got to look back at just how desperately this price drop was needed in the first place.
There's this classic rule of thumb in finance. A home really shouldn't cost more than 3 times your annual household income. But at its peak, the price of a typical house in the Toronto area had just exploded to more than 11 times what the average family was making. That's just a completely unsustainable situation.
And as this timeline shows, this problem didn't just pop up overnight. The dream of actually owning a home has been slipping away for a long, long time. 20 years ago, the ratio was under 6 times income. A decade ago, it shot past 8. And that relentless climb to over 11 is what pushed Toronto's market into what many would call a global crisis category.
And one of our sources puts it really bluntly. For the city to even have a thriving middle class, a place where an average family can actually build a future, something had to give. Those prices just had to come down, period. But here's where the story takes a huge twist. As we're going to see in this next section, the construction paradox, that so-called good news of falling prices, has set off an immediate and honestly a really dangerous new problem. Just look at these numbers. They are absolutely catastrophic. In just the last month, sales of brand new homes have completely fallen off a cliff. Compared to the 10-year average, new detached home sales are down 74%, and new condos, they're down an unbelievable 91%. The market for new construction has, for all intents and purposes, just frozen solid. And this right here, this quote, gets to the very heart of the problem. When prices fall this far, this fast, developers just can't make the math work anymore. The cost to buy the land, pay for all the materials, and hire the workers is now actually higher than what they can sell the finished home for. So they just stop building. And here it is, the paradox in a nutshell. Toronto is desperate for lower prices so people can afford to live there. But those exact same low prices are slamming the brakes on all the new construction the city needs to fix its housing shortage in the long run. The two goals are now fighting each other.
Now, this deep freeze in construction is not just a housing problem. It's a real economic threat that could send shockwaves through the entire city. Let's take a look at the potential damage. So if this construction halt keeps going, the potential damage is just staggering. We're talking about an annual loss of $6.6 billion in government revenue. That's taxes and fees. And the complete disappearance of up to 41,000 jobs in construction and all the industries that support it. And you've got to remember, this is all happening while Toronto's unemployment rate is already sitting at a high 9.7%. Losing another 41,000 jobs on top of that would be a truly devastating blow to the city's families and its economy.
So what's the way out? How can Toronto possibly solve a problem where the most obvious solution just seems to create another equally painful crisis? Well, the experts we've looked at say it requires a big shift in thinking.
And this is the key insight. The real solution isn't just about making the final sticker price cheaper for the buyer. It's about lowering the cost to build for the builder. If you can make it cheaper to build a home, then developers can actually afford to sell it for less and still stay in business. That's how you break the paradox. So analysts are proposing this whole toolkit of solutions to attack that initial construction cost. This isn't about one magic bullet, it's a whole bunch of things at once. We're talking practical moves, like cutting government fees, updating old tax rebates so they actually work with today's prices, and even bigger ideas, like changing zoning laws to allow for more types of homes. Let's dig into a couple of these.
I love this quote from the mayor of Vaughan, which is a city right next to Toronto. It captures the logic perfectly. He went ahead and cut some of the big municipal fees on new construction. Why? Because it's better to collect a smaller fee on a project that actually gets built than to demand a huge fee on a project that never even starts. You get half of something instead of 100% of nothing. Makes sense, right? Okay, another huge pressure point is the sales tax, the HST. Here's the deal. It adds almost 13% to the cost of a new home, which puts it at a big disadvantage compared to resale homes which don't have that tax. Now, there is a rebate program meant to fix this, but here's the crazy part. It hasn't been updated since the 1990s. It was designed for a world where houses cost under $450,000. Today, that describes almost no new homes in Toronto. So the rebate is basically useless, and new construction is stuck with this massive, unfair tax burden.
So at the end of the day, finding a way out of this whole mess isn't about picking a side, buyers versus builders or affordability versus the economy. It's about finding a really delicate and probably difficult new balance. As one real estate expert from our source material points out, this is the fundamental challenge. You have to support both sides of the coin. You need policies that make it possible for regular people to afford a home, while also making sure it's economically possible for companies to actually build them. So I think the biggest takeaway here is that just sitting back and hoping the market will fix itself is probably the riskiest move of all. Doing nothing could lead to a future where there are no new homes being built, the economy is in even more pain, and the affordability crisis never, ever gets solved. And that leaves all of us with the final and really critical question. The city is walking a tightrope. Can it find a way to make housing affordable for its people without accidentally destroying the very industry that builds those homes? That is the high-stakes balancing act that is going to define Toronto's future.